Welcome to the Nonprofit Edge, a podcast series to promote purpose in practice. Each week, this webinar series features an extraordinary individual that provides valuable and impactful services, helping to transform the capabilities of their nonprofit clients. Join us as we explore a variety of topics, all vital to the success of nonprofit organizations. Learn and grow from the experience and expertise of our featured guests. Without further delay, let's introduce you to the host of the Nonprofit Edge podcast series, Chris Looney.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Today on the Nonprofit Edge, we're joined by Tim Davis, president of Glick Davis Associates, one of the leading voices in guiding nonprofit organizations through mergers, partnerships, and strategic integrations. Tim has more than 2 decades of experience helping nonprofit leaders navigate really complex organizational transitions with clarity and purpose. His work emphasizes the human side of mergers, the importance of trust, culture, and mission alignment, while also bringing deep expertise in financial and operational strategy. And in today's conversation, we'll unpack what nonprofit leaders need to know about mergers and acquisitions when they make sense, how to approach them strategically, and what separates successful integrations from those that never quite take root. So I'm super excited to dig into this, and it's going to be a real treat for the audience. Welcome to the show, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Chris, thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to be here.
Yeah, I am too. Before we get started and sort of set the stage even for our conversation, if you would please just introduce yourself a little bit, tell us about Glick Davis Associates, tell us about the work you do, and how you even arrived at this expertise.
Yeah, well, thanks. Glick Davis Associates, I can actually give full credit to Jan Glick. Founded us over 30 years ago now, and focused on the nonprofit space. That's what we do, is we help nonprofit clients. And Jan founded it on this concept of how could he help struggling nonprofits turn around, groups that really needed a big financial pivot, or were, the ship was going down in flames. Now, he even wrote a book about it. You can buy it on Amazon. It's Nonprofit Turnarounds. From that work, the organization kind of evolved into a few other work streams, because one of the solutions he kept finding when he was doing these financial turnarounds or strategic turnarounds was looking at M&A opportunities to help these companies remain viable and be more sustainable. It became a strategy in a turnaround. So it naturally evolved into that practice. And so now if you check us out, we're glickdavis.com. We really focus on leading nonprofits through large scale change. So whether that's through, big strategic pivots because the market and landscape has shifted, big financial turnarounds, when everything's going down, M&A work, CEO or CFO placement that's coming in to help lead the organization in a new way. That's what we specialize in. When you really need not micro changes or not small adjustments to what you're doing, but you really need to course correct and get back on a good path.
Yeah, I got it. That's great. Well, what kind of first drew you to the work of helping nonprofits navigate mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah. Well, I'd worked in and around and adjacent to nonprofits for a long time, and but I was predominantly in the corporate sector, and I was an M&A guy. So I was the your hardcore corporate raider type, if you will, corporate development, corporate raider. And I actually met Jan. He was representing a nonprofit group up in the Pacific Northwest. They were struggling. They had a great program. They actually were residential and outpatient treatment for women with substance abuse.
Okay.
All state funded, really great staff. They had an incredibly talented staff. They had an incredible building. They had incredible presence in the community, but just bleeding red everywhere. And Jan was trying to help them through the turnaround. They decided that they probably needed to partner with somebody.
Okay.
Was introduced to them. And we actually did an acquisition where, because it was a nonprofit, we weren't paying somebody out a bunch of money. We weren't, enriching somebody on the back end. We created a foundation to fund women's treatment in the area for the next several years. We put several $1 million into it. We ensured that the whole staff had a job on day one and going forward. We ensured the executive director had a contract for a year plus at better than their existing salary. And I really took a look around after doing that deal, and selfishly, I felt a little better about myself. I was like, wow, this
Right.
deal changed lives in a good way, right? It kept clients in treatment, it kept a staff employed. Everything that was going to go under in the next 30 days kept going. The mission kept going. We even built mission statements into the acquisition documents. And it was a cool process. And so then Jan and I had the opportunity to start working together more. There were several other deals that came around that I was able to step in and help facilitate.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I went full time into this quite a while ago now with Jan, and we've been doing it ever since. So yeah, it took my decades of corporate M&A experience with nonprofit adjacencies, and now full on into the nonprofit realm.
Yeah, well, I think that's something you and I do have in common is that sort of banking background and then moving into the nonprofit world. And I think that big transition is like the money's great, but you don't really understand what it means to have the sleep of the just until you start really working in the nonprofit sector and being mission driven and mission focused. So it's great to find a kindred spirit in that way. I know when people hear M&A, they think of the corporate raider, corporate takeovers. Maybe Gordon Gekko pops into their head.
Yeah.
Um, so how is the nonprofit version different, and where are there similarities?
There's both, and it's funny. The initial reaction we get with the words M&A or mergers and acquisition is his hands up and walk away 9 times out of 10. We have lost deals because we simply use the phrase merger and acquisition
Yeah.
rather than partnership or venture or a new pivot. So I mean it does come with a lot of connotation where people have that reaction to it.
100%.
Yeah. So we actually wrote a white paper about 5 years ago now, kind of during the COVID times, on what is different between a nonprofit M&A acquisition and a for-profit one. And you can check it out. It's on our website. But some of the key differences, kind of what I just talked about for one of them. One, nobody's making money on the back end. So, but on the flip side, you're not just selling one guy or woman on the price. You have to convince multiple boards and multiple stakeholders that this is the
Right.
best long-term decision for everybody.
Right.
And it's not about getting the price right. It's about consensus building and getting everybody in that the long-term strategy is the right fit, which isn't always an easier sell than just getting the dollar.
No, that seems like a very difficult proposition.
It's time consuming in certain cases. But there's some positives that come out of it too. So, in corporate M&A, I will say, the Gordon Gekko things, you tend to see and read in the news, jobs being slashed afterwards, duplication
Right.
getting rid of, right?
Right. Streamline, efficiency,
Streamline it down, efficiency, all the way, right? We don't
waste, fraud, and abuse being gone.
Get them all out the door. Profit jumps immediately. Yep. And we don't see that on the nonprofit side. And there's a few reasons for it. One, show me a service-oriented nonprofit that's overstaffed. There's not a lot. They're all doing way more.
Never ever seen in my life a bloated nonprofit staff. Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody's wearing multiple hats. Everybody's doing two jobs. Everybody's stretched thin and trying to do as much as they can.
So true.
Right? Very rarely do you see them come in with like full C-suites, right? You don't see a lot that have CEO, CFO, COO. Yeah, some do, but when they're merging, the entities we're merging, maybe one has a financial team, one has an HR specialist, one lost their CEO earlier in the year, and they're just coming together and filling gaps.
Yeah. Right. Now, in fairness, we're talking here not necessarily about billion-dollar nonprofits. We're not talking necessarily here about Alsac St. Jude or the United Way Global or something like that. We're talking about organizations that are probably small to mid-sized organizations, and I don't know what size you see the most M&A activity? Is there a particular size? And sorry to go off script, but it just
No,
struck me that there's so many nonprofits of all sizes, right?
it's a great question. Let me answer it in two parts. One, yeah, you're right. We're not talking about the big billion-dollar ones here. We've worked with some of the largest ones, and that's a little different shtick because they do come with a fully equipped team that's ready to do it, right? And so it looks different. A lot of the activity that we see happens in that, $1 to $15 million nonprofit space. Groups that really haven't been able to build out what's needed to kind of go beyond. Because once you hit 10 to 15 million, you do need that C-suite type of capability coming in. You need
and there's probably fewer part redundancies in terms of others doing the same services the larger you get.
Yes, as well. So we see a lot in that range. We have done some with much, much larger, like hospital organizations,
right.
Very large national groups. And again, that looks different because they're generally picking up smaller, more local types of groups and bringing them into a larger entity. We still don't see the layoffs, though. We still don't see the
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we still see they need everybody on the ground delivering a service, and how can we, expand or further the mission, not contract it, because that's generally what it's for.
Yeah, right. And it is interesting in the nonprofit space how growing the mission is still very conditional on human capital. It requires more people. Now that who knows what the future holds, but typically if someone says, I want more mission, then the response would be, okay, I need more money and I need more people, and we'll deliver more mission. So that's probably still very, very accurate. So I love this difference, right? This difference that you're not letting people go. That seems so important. Are there major similarities that you find?
At the end of the deal, you still have the legal documentation. It says, purchase agreement or merger agreement or venture agreement. And some of the structure looks the same in terms of just the legalese that's on there. The process of diligence of looking at the partnership and making sure that everything is above board, that everybody's disclosing, kind of the bad things that they don't want everybody to know about. That there's a little transparency coming in there. But another interesting thing there, instead of just one party disclosing, which is often the case, corporate M&A, right? Like whoever's getting acquired has to disclose everything without the buyer disclosing. Nonprofit is much more equitable. I will say that the person getting acquired asks a lot more questions of the acquirer or the larger entity, and there's an expectation that transparency goes both ways.
Fascinating.
And I think it has to do with you got to get both boards built in the staffs too. Everyone wants to know and needs to know what the plan is. Again, back to that consensus building. And so it's not as much of we don't know what's going to happen on day one once we sign these papers. You generally go in knowing a lot more of what is going to happen and what that expectation is going to look like than you would in a corporate one.
Yeah. Well, why do you think we're seeing more nonprofit mergers and partnerships now than in previous decades?
I have multiple theories, but here's my most logical one.
So lay it on me.
Yeah. Several years ago, I forget how long ago, the total number of nonprofits in the country was like 1.5 million or so. And we hear about all these financial problems and funding issues and struggles to get federal funding and all the reasons why the sector should shrink year after year. Well, right now there's over 1.9 million nonprofits. So we're not shrinking. We're not going anywhere. As a sector, we keep growing. We keep adding more entities. The money isn't necessarily expanding to support it, though. The needs are still out there. And so at some point, you've got to be more efficient using the money to deliver the services and get it out to the people that you're trying to help. And regardless of where you are in the nonprofit sector, you're trying to maximize the impact for whoever you're trying to help and support. And sometimes you just got to come together to be more efficient. We can't just keep splitting it up into more and more micro chunks when there's the opportunity to impact a lot more people.
Yeah, fair. I love that. Well, what are some of the very most common reasons nonprofits consider a merger or acquisition today?
The first one that always leaps to mind, and this, because we see it across all of our lines of business, right? We don't see a single nonprofit that when we get into strategic discussions with them isn't focused on somehow diversifying the revenue streams or increasing their, quote unquote, earned income streams.
Yep.
That definition varies, right? And so if you're already resource strapped as an organization and you need to diversify your revenue or expand your service streams, it's hard to do that organically internally when your people are already strapped out. If someone has already started it, or they're 2 years down the road in it, or they've already figured out some of the issues you would be encountering, they probably still have their own struggles. We encourage having that conversation. Go out and have that conversation about partnering, rather than just focusing on building it de novo in-house. So that's the number one reason that comes to mind. The most frequent call we get is because, hey, our ship is sinking, and we need some help right now, right?
Yeah, bail us out.
Yeah, bail us out. And those are my most frequent calls, not always my favorite calls.
Sure.
Because depending on how far the ship is sunk, you can't ask someone you're wanting to partner with to take on everything bad that might come with you if you're already too far under, right? If you have an important impact on the community, if you've still got some core staff and structure and things there, great. But if you're already 3 months past where you started losing your key staff, you've lost some of the community behind you, you've already irritated too many people because for not paying bills and paying salaries and getting where you need to be, you're at a tough point. And
yeah. And who knows, you might have assets but not cash, and you need some help just surviving so that you don't have to liquidate everything. It's interesting because I think our conversation in terms of the rationale for why nonprofits consider a merger and acquisition has been focused on the entity being acquired, but not on an entity that's on an acquisition run. And in the sort of for-profit world, it would be the big company gobbling up a lot of smaller entities. Not the smaller entity saying help, but rather, or at least not saying help, we want this, but help get me away from this big whale that's about to swallow me. And I'm interested in kind of, is there another side of this? Are there the larger nonprofits that are out acquiring? So a big hospital that's just out there looking to gobble up local hospitals, or what is the other side of that coin?
Yeah, there are large nonprofit hospital systems that are acquiring physician organizations or physician practices or secondary sites.
Yep.
There's large clinic operations that do the same thing. We've actually even recently seen it in the tech space, where large nonprofit out there has actually acquired some for-profit tech startups and put them under their.
Why not, right?
Yeah. So yes, we see it out there. And we also see it as a defensive maneuver in the nonprofit space in the for-profit space, when somebody in a certain service line is on a roll and they're picking up, and I'm going to use the healthcare sector for reference, right? So in the mental health or behavioral health space, we see acquisition after acquisition after acquisition of mental health providers or autism providers, stuff like that. Well, there's a pretty big service component in the nonprofit space serving those communities. There always has been, and there's going to be. Right. And to stay large enough to be viable, they're trying to avoid getting picked up by some of these for-profit groups. They are looking to partner with other groups and build kind of their own side of the fence that's treating a lot of times the people that this other entity isn't wanting to help, right? Pulling funds away from, and they're trying to stick with the more profitable side of the client spectrum, if you will.
Yeah.
And, these clients over here still need that support. And they're trying to keep those resources there where they need to be.
Yep. So there definitely are both sides. There are the smaller, or struggling, trying to join another organization or entity. And then there's the bigger, maybe more well-established that are trying to acquire for their own reasons, whether it's growth or protection or whatever it might be. So I think it's good to know, because one might assume that it's only one side. It's just these struggling nonprofits that are looking for survival. And I think that doesn't accurately or provide an accurate understanding of how powerful some of these nonprofits are, that they have the financial wherewithal to acquire lots of other entities. Anyway,
yeah, one more on that comment.
Please.
Yeah, I just want to agree with you. Absolutely. We do partner with some really large nonprofits that do that. They go on these acquiring sprees. And also remember, you don't always, even though some of them are very cash heavy, don't get me wrong, you don't always need to be cash heavy to do it. A lot of nonprofit deals are $0 deals.
Okay.
So, you're looking to expand rapidly and partner with some people. It doesn't always cost you the same as what it might on the for-profit side. It's
That's good to know. And we haven't, and we could spend an enormous amount of time just exploring the interesting assets that might come with an acquisition, whether it's an endowment or foundation or a building or all of these sort of CRTs or whatever it might be that are attached in some way to the organization. So it can be very complicated, I guess is what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be zero. It doesn't have to involve cash. It could be zero cash, but it probably there are some interesting strings that are probably attached to these deals, and I don't want to get distracted by all of those. But I'm sure you've had to wade through some interesting situations.
I will say no deal looks the same. So even if you've seen one deal, you have not seen your next deal, and it is going to always come with different strings and different conditions and different pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah, that's great. And a lot of our audience are nonprofit leaders out there with their own perspectives and challenges, and some of them are short term, some of them are long term. But question I would have is how can leaders tell the difference between sort of a short term financial fix and a truly strategic opportunity for greater impact long term?
Yeah. Well, I would caution anyone looking for a short-term fix that that's not your solution, right? This is a long-term pivot. Whether you're really partnering with somebody, whether you are acquiring somebody or being acquired, it's not going to look the same after. Your organization will not look fundamentally the same. It's going to change. So don't do it for short-term reasons.
Good advice.
Yeah.
What are the early indicators that an organization might be ready or not ready for this kind of move?
Yeah, I think it applies to more organizations out there than people think. Obviously, as we already mentioned, if you're financially struggling, it should be a consideration as a strategy to get you out of that situation. Whether you're struggling a little bit or whether you're struggling a lot financially, you should at least consider it as one of your strategies to turn the organization around. It may not be the one you choose, but you should have a talk about it.
Of course.
If you know that your community or your clients or whoever you're servicing needs more from your organization or need services you aren't delivering, and you're thinking through how to get it to them, it should also enter the conversation as a possibility, not just you doing it organically, but who could we partner with that may have already figured out some of the kinks, that may already know how to do this a little bit better than us just putting our heads together in a room. You should have the conversation. And then, if you look around your space and you can start naming off multiple organizations trying to do similar work to you, servicing the same clientele as you, service, the community in similar ways, and that number is growing every year, eventually somebody's going to lose. And, for better or for worse, we're businesses in the nonprofit space. And at some point, the bigger businesses are going to win out. So you might want to think about getting ahead of that game before you get blocked out, of the community you're trying to serve.
Yeah, good. Well, you often talk about the role of culture in successful mergers. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah. Well, I'll play back to the early example of talking about building consensus before a deal.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of times, and I come from both sides of this, right? For-profit, nonprofit. So in for-profit, your deal looks like getting the price right, some of the terms right, maybe the legal structure and some of the requirements that people have to abide by for the first few years of a deal. In a nonprofit merger, what tends to take a lot longer up front is sitting the boards down, sitting the leadership down of the organizations, and you mapping out how you're going to work together. And that culture of bringing everybody in the room and talking about what it should look like in 6 months, in 12 months, in 18 months, who's going to sit in what seats, both at the board and the staff level, right? Which board members are going to still stay on there? Who's going to be the board chair, right? There's only one afterwards. Who's going to be the CEO? What's it going to look like? And you have these conversations before you ever sign that final deal. And you're in the room. And if those cultures aren't working, you're going to know. Like, it comes out early on. And, but you also have the opportunity to see if you can work through it before you're signed and committed and married for life. So,
yeah, no, that's good. And I'm sure when those cultures don't match or when there's not the chemistry with those cultures, it can be dramatic. It can really, I guess, sparks might fly. Yes.
We get brought in fairly often because groups that have been trying to merge, and they tell us in the open, the introductory calls, oh, we've been working on this for 4 years, 5 years, and we have various board changes and new board members, and we've never gotten everybody to vote to approve, to agree. So yeah, it takes some time.
That's an interesting dynamic. So you're not necessarily able through whole cloth to put the deal together. You're attempting to salvage it or to make it work or to bring a different leadership element that might get people to see things differently. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, every so often we're not as much a deal maker as a facilitator, right? We sit everybody down in the room and shine some light of reality on it, of what it needs to look like.
Yeah, and maybe in the for-profit M&A space that there's some similarities there, but it feels like M&A in the for-profit world is about getting the deal done. That just, it doesn't matter. We just got to push it through and get the deal points and sign the deal and get paid and move on. But in this particular scenario, there isn't a benefit to ramming something through because you aren't getting these winners out of the deal. People aren't getting paid, and people have to live with the consequences, or the community, I should say, has to live with the consequences and the failure potentially of not being able to deliver those services effectively.
And it is the community, and that's why, I mentioned earlier, don't wait till it's too late, right? Until you're already so on fire and everything is falling apart, because it's not about saving the organization, it's about delivering the resources and the services to the community. And if you have put yourself in a place where you can't do that anymore and you're going to pull more resources away from the community just to kind of get you back up, you may have waited a little bit too long.
Good. So understand. Well, how do leaders maintain trust and transparency during what can be an emotional and uncertain time for staff and stakeholders?
This is a hard one, right? And because the conversations start off very tight-knit. They're generally going to start at just the board chairs and the CEOs, maybe having kind of a 4-person type of conversation, right? And then it's going to gradually expand, and it's going to start to include the board. And it may start to include some of the executive or senior leadership team outside of that, right? And then once you reach that point, word starts spreading really, really fast. And you do have to manage the culture now of both organizations, right, that are going to hear about this, and both boards. And so before you ever go outside of that little circle of 3 or 4 people having the discussion, we help clients map out what's your communication plan going to look like. What are we going to tell staff? What are we going to tell board? You can't always tell them everything right up front, but you can start to be communicative about what discussions might be happening, about what a possibility might be, about what it will entail for the organization, about job security. It's always a big one. You got to keep hitting home over and over and over again. And those conversations also happen prior to the deal, which is the difference, right? Because a lot of times you don't hear it till the day after it's signed in for profit. We don't go into a lot of nonprofit deals where everyone doesn't know before it's signed, like all the way down to the bottom frontline staff having some idea that it's happening.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's good. And what are some of those unfortunate mistakes, rookie mistakes that maybe some of these organizations make when they navigate these transitions?
One of the most common,
and you can't say they didn't hire us.
Oh no, that'd be great if I could just say that. Yeah, right. No. I will say it's not unanimous across the board, but in almost every instance, there are board members who mean well and they want to lead it through, but they approach it only through the lens that they've seen in their for-profit.
Ooh, right. I see that all the time.
And they are trying to help the organization. They know the organization needs to consider it, but they have never seen a different approach. They've never seen a collaborative approach. They've never seen kind of this community building, strategic planning, togetherness approach to it. Yeah. And sometimes they say or do things that represent a different path that tend to scare people off and slow the deal or sometimes kill the deal. They're not meaning to, like they are genuinely trying to help, but it's a different approach. Yeah.
Of course. And, in my fundraising world and lens, it was typically board members not understanding the uniqueness of fundraising in the nonprofit space as opposed to, fundraising in the VC world or any of these other kind of commission-based sales roles. And so there's all kinds of dangers whenever we introduce these board members into a nonprofit sector, because they do bring their limited for-profit perspectives. And yes, well-meaning as they might be, they sometimes can't adjust to the differences that exist in the nonprofit space. So thanks for highlighting that for us all. And is there a way around it? Is there something that you would recommend, an approach that you would recommend to kind of not fall into these pitfalls?
Yeah, it's not a rocket science approach either. It's just an understanding that you're going to approach it from a trust building and a more open discussion standpoint than you will. You're not going to show up with your spreadsheet and say, I have everyone's salaries, justify why they're making this and where we can cut some costs going in, right? You're going to talk about what communities are being served, what the organizations want to accomplish long-term, where you want to see it in a year, and how as board members, you can show up to support this effort and really make the organization stronger, more viable, and can you impact more lives or more community or in a better way, in a higher quality of service delivery than you were before. And if you can keep them going through that lens and see that they need to be impact focused more than financial focused.
Yep.
It goes really well. And I think they get very excited by the impact that they can help be a part of as well.
Neat. Well, that's great. Okay. So I know this could be very detailed, but in a more broad sketch way, can you walk us through what a well-run merger process looks like from start to finish.
Yeah. Well, in our ideal world,
Yes.
clients call us before they've had any conversations with
Yep.
any other partners that they might engage in. They're just at that strategic planning phase. Either they want to expand and offer more,
Yep.
whether it be services or whatever, or, they're looking, or even financially, they've realized that, hey, we aren't doing as well. We're considering this as part of a strategic route.
Right. But early. Yeah.
Early on, I mean, we get them all the time late on, but early on. And then sitting down with them and really kind of hashing out, what do you want to do long term? If you've been downsizing, what core elements do you want to keep together? What community impact do you want to make sure survives no matter what? What do you wish you'd done a little bit differently? And if you're looking to expand, get really detailed into where, to what portions of the market, to what clients or communities, and then we help put together those true market plans. Who should we be talking to? Let's get the full list. Let's get everybody on there. Who's doing it? Who's doing it well? Who's not doing it well? And we narrow it down subjectively first, right? We have conversations at the board and CEO level. Okay, here's the list. We haven't even talked to anybody. But who on here fits just in your head for who should we cross off? Who should we keep on? And then we move it into gradual negotiations. We may talk to 20 organizations before we ever get to anything that resembles a letter of intent or an MOU, memorandum of understanding. Let's go have those conversations. Let's be a part of them. Let's see who's interested. Let's see who takes it well, see who brings some other ideas to the table. And then maybe we get down to the 3 or 4 where we put something on paper. We get a little more confidential in those discussions, and we start trying to see if there's something that can be mapped out and fleshed out, and make it happen. That's, an ideal world scenario. I would love it if that happened every time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you find the partner and you begin the discussions. And I imagine there's a pretty significant amount of paperwork involved in the deal itself, and new bylaws and new board structures and all kinds of things. I mean, the actual output of paperwork must be pretty extraordinary.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
So sometimes, so, when we sit down with some of these organizations, we do draft a whole new strategic plan, a whole new org chart, a whole new board structure. If
Okay.
everybody's coming together and wants to have those conversations, I will tell you, the merger documents sometimes, like if we're truly doing a merger, not an acquisition, right? It's like 4 pages.
Interesting.
Whereas a corporate M&A document, it may be, a stack of paper you could knock somebody unconscious with.
Got it. Interesting. No, that's good to know. And what are the roles typically of the board versus the CEO or executive team during these acquisitions or mergers?
So it's the board's decision in the end. And they can even trump the CEO, right? So the
Sure.
board can open an organization, shutter an organization, hire, fire a CEO, or decide to merge or acquire. It's one of the biggest decisions a board can make.
Yeah.
Which is why it's really important they're involved in it and looking through that impact light. So I have seen them overrule, but generally 95% of the time, they're going to support their CEO or their leader in those conversations, but you have to win them over a little bit that that's going to be the right decision.
Sure.
And they want their CEO to convince them it's the right decision, and why they should go down that path. And we see it happen with interim CEOs with those conversations, or existing CEOs. But they're going to back their CEO most of the time.
Yeah. Well, and a good CEO is going to not surprise their board with any of these sorts of conversations or ideas. It's going to be collaborative and supportive because they've been engaged. Yeah. Well, is there a certain due diligence or evaluation process that's different in the nonprofit context compared to, private or for-profit sector?
Yeah. So when we get into those discussions with those like top 2 or 3 organizations, right? Once we've narrowed it down from everybody that we want to talk to, and we've got people that are interested in having the talks, we do generally sign NDAs at that point. We get it, non-disclosure agreements, all that stuff, confidentiality. The document transfer, like I said earlier, is much more equitable both sides. So, both sides are going to share a little bit of their financial outlook, how their service lines are performing, what their staffing structure looks like. And they're going to come together and do, that strategic planning. Now, if one company is acquiring the other, they're going to do full due diligence. I mean, they're going to want to know, every loan you've got outstanding, every dollar that may be owed somewhere, what are the things and struggles that your organization is facing. And if you are a struggling organization that's going through this, you got to be able to produce it pretty quickly because time's running out on you, right? And every day that you're burning cash, you kind of are devaluing yourself. So the ability to deliver that very quickly and openly and transparently can build trust pretty rapidly and help accelerate the speed of the process. So I don't want to downplay diligence. It gets, people are going to dig in. They want to know, especially if you come to them waving a flag saying, hey, we're going under. You need to be upfront about why you're going under and what's happening.
Yeah.
And that can help speed it up a bit. But there is still an expectation that the acquirers share their plans and their situation and why they are a good fit. And they need to convince the other board that we're going to take care of this mission and this culture and these people because we're going to do these things. And that's just part of the process.
Yeah, good. Well, what does the communication plan look like when you are announcing the merger or implementing the merger?
Yeah. And each one looks a little differently depending on how it's going to go in the community and who the big stakeholders are. But a lot of times we're lining up the public announcement, the full internal communication, and the key stakeholder messaging in a certain way. So we want staff and key stakeholders to know before that big public thing gets announced. And so we are communicating very directly with those parties in the days leading up to it, asking for confidentiality, but explaining and answering questions. A lot of time with key stakeholders talking about how it's going to affect maybe their relationship in the community a little bit or what it might look like. And then the public announcement is generally more on the back end of all of that. So sometimes it's already leaked a little bit out there, but you want to make sure that, again, people and parties are more aware of, the people you work with and need to know about it, know ahead of time.
Yeah. It's always the situation. The good advice is over communicate, control the narrative, be sure your stakeholders are engaged and aware, and don't forget certain audiences that are going to be highly offended if they're not involved, especially your staff. So,
yes, and then people will get very, very highly offended if they're not involved. So
exactly, yeah. All right, so we're sort of on the back end of the conversation here, and want to think a little bit about the future and advice that you'd offer. So, as we look ahead, how do you see mergers and alliances shaping the future of the nonprofit sector over the next decade and beyond?
I think it has the possibility to drive a pretty large impact. We have to see ourselves as a sector as being able to deliver quality and quantity on par with for-profit organizations and not get too stuck in we only serve a small pocket of this community with whatever resources we can scrap together. We can do a lot more, and we can do a lot more if we come together, which is a rallying cry you hear across the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
Everybody's pretty bought into that mentality that we need to work together. We're all resource strapped to deliver that. Well, this naturally follows that model. Granted, it's M&A, which has a reaction and a connotation, but it's another way to do that and actually make us more viable as organizations, more sustainable, and better equipped to do a lot more. The needs of the people we're helping out there aren't going away anytime soon. They're probably going to grow on a lot of fronts. I come from the mental health space. Those needs aren't disappearing anytime soon. They're only accelerating. Right. And there's a bigger and bigger part of the population just being left untargeted and unhelped all the time. So I'm pretty personally vested in the mental health space, especially that I know those needs are only going to expand and grow. And the nonprofit community serves a ton of those people and will need to serve more and more every day. So I want to help them get there and I want to help those people get treated. That's me personally. That's the space I come from. That's struggles my family's dealt with for, a long time. So I'm invested in that one, but I see that across other service lines as well.
Yeah, right. And oftentimes competition isn't what is driving better outcomes. Like you might see sometimes in the for-profit sector. Sometimes competition means that both organizations are starving themselves and their clients and the community from the kinds of benefits that collaboration might be the solution for. So,
Well, and so I love outcome-based treatments, right? They are great. But what the nonprofit sector serves there, and I'll stick with mental health as my example because I know it pretty well.
yeah.
Nonprofit serves the folks no one else will treat because they know the outcomes won't be as good. And so when groups won't treat people because they know it's going to drag their outcomes down, there's a larger and larger subset of this population that isn't getting the treatment they need just because of outcome-based measurement tools and trying to keep
we definitely try to ignore that reality, right? That there are for-profit companies that will ignore certain populations because they make their numbers look bad.
There's either no money in treating them, which is the case for a lot, or there, lots of chronic conditions that people know probably aren't going to ever be fully reversed, but still need a lot of support for their lifetime.
Right. Amazing. Okay, so for a leader listening who's starting to wonder if this might be their future, in addition to calling you, which I would encourage, what's maybe the very first step they should take?
You know what? Well, we'd always love a call, but you don't have to call us. CEO and board chair. This is the time of year for some groups, they're looking at strategic planning for next year. You may be doing that throughout the year, but December, January, people are involved in that. Whatever you're looking at, whether it's trying to be a little more financially viable or expand your services or do a little different, you two just have the conversation like, hey, what if we had a phone call or two with some partners in the area and just floated this idea? Would that be worth a couple hours of our time? You guys don't, you guys can reach out on your own. You don't need us to have those conversations. Just have it between yourself and see. I think you might be surprised if you reach across the aisle with some other organizations. Don't use the terms M&A, but partnership and solutions and impact in the community, and just see if maybe there's something there you haven't thought about before.
Yeah. Definitely don't use the word hostile.
Don't use hostile takeover, poison pill, anything like those. But
that should be easy enough to avoid. Yeah. All right. So finally, what's the best piece of leadership advice you've received when guiding organizations through major change?
Oh, goodness. So many. The one thing I tell leaders when we come into a large scale change, if it's a strategic pivot, it's a full turnaround, or something like this, the decisions you made that got the organization to this point, and especially for like a turnaround or something in a strategic pivot, are no longer the decisions you can make tomorrow. That every decision you have been making, even the rote ones that you just know that you do week by week, you have to start looking at and reframing to change in order to be successful in the future. So as soon as you realize your organization has to pivot and strategic change, realize that means every level of your decision-making as a leader now has to change.
Amazing. That's so great. Words to live by. And thank you for not only that piece of advice, but for all of the advice and guidance and wisdom that you've shared over the last 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever it's been. So thank you, Tim. You're just a wealth of knowledge, and the audience is going to be very appreciative to have experienced this. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to like and follow the Nonprofit Edge. Please also check out Lead for Good and Mastering Fundraising, two other podcasts that, similar to this one, interview an expert in the field and really dig into their expertise, learn from them, grow from them. So check those out. And until next time, thanks again for joining, and have a great one. We'll see you very soon.
And Chris, thanks for having us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You bet. Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for the Nonprofit Edge, a podcast series to promote purpose in practice. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation and learned some important lessons from our featured expert. We always want our content to be informative and to position nonprofit leaders to succeed. Please join us again for our next podcast. In the meantime, we wish you all the best and encourage you to learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership by visiting our website at www.fulcrumleader.com.